Stop what you are doing. This is not a normal business headline. Tesla just slammed the brakes on a massive 40B EV expansion across California. And within hours, the governor's office didn't just respond, they erupted. Because when a 40B plan freezes in the biggest EV state in America, it's not a pause, it's a warning flare. And here's the uncomfortable reality. If Tesla is pulling back in California, the state built to be the EV future, then something underneath the system is cracking. Not later, not someday, right now. Think about that. The company that basically helped brand California as the clean tech capital is now signaling in the loudest way possible that the math isn't mathing, and the governor knows exactly what that implies. Because $40 isn't just factories and charging stalls. It's jobs, it's tax revenue, it's supplier contracts, it's construction crews, it's local economies that were already counting the money before it arrived. Now consider the implications. When a project this large freezes, the shock doesn't hit like a single explosion. It hits like a slow power outage. First, the contractors go quiet, then the hiring stops, then the suppliers panic. Then the cities that planned around new growth suddenly have a hole in their budget. And that's why the governor's reaction matters. Not because of the politics, because of the pressure. California has positioned itself as the national template. Mandates, subsidies, deadlines, public statements that basically dared the rest of America to keep up. So if Tesla freezes $40 in that environment, it creates a terrifying question. What does Tesla know that everyone else is still pretending isn't happening? Pause here. This detail matters. Tesla didn't freeze some tiny pilot program. This wasn't, we're delaying one building. This was a signal that ripples through the entire EV chain in the most EV-friendly state in the country. And this is where things turn. Because the governor can't treat this like a private company doing private company things. If Tesla's expansion stalls, the state's entire narrative gets exposed. All those promises about rapid build-outs and inevitable adoption suddenly look fragile. And fragility is contagious. Now the situation becomes more dangerous. When leaders feel control slipping, they don't get calmer. They get louder. They get sharper. They look for someone to blame. And that's when policy starts getting emotional. So the governor erupts. Because in the background, there are meetings happening that viewers never see. Budget assumptions, infrastructure timelines, emission targets, labor projections, and now a 40B hole is sitting in the middle of all of it like a sinkhole opening under a highway. Let that sink in. A sinkhole, not a speed bump. And then comes the next layer of stress. California isn't just trying to grow EVs, it's trying to force a transformation on a schedule. That means the state needs companies to execute on time at scale with no drama. But reality is messy. Reality has interest rates. Reality has supply chain volatility. Reality has consumer demand that can surge and then suddenly stall. So when Tesla freezes an expansion, it suggests that even Tesla, the most battle-tested EV company on earth, is deciding the risk is too high right now. And that should concern you. Because if the leader hesitates, what do the followers do? They don't sprint, they stall. Here's the part nobody expects. This isn't only about Tesla. This is about leverage. A 40B expansion gives a state momentum. It gives it bargaining power. It gives it headlines. It gives it the image of inevitability. A 40B freeze does the opposite. It tells every investor, every supplier, every competing state, and every skeptical consumer that California might not be the guaranteed win everyone assumed. Read that again. Not guaranteed. And now we get to the governor's real nightmare. Optics become economics. If business leaders start whispering that California is too expensive, too regulated, too unpredictable, then every next big project gets harder to lock down. And once that perception spreads, it doesn't matter how many press conferences you hold. You can't negotiate with a narrative that's already caught fire. But here is where it gets worse. A freeze doesn't have to be permanent to cause damage. Even a temporary halt can break timelines. And broken timelines trigger penalties. They trigger renegotiations. They trigger layoffs. They trigger political attacks. So the governor's eruption is also a defensive move. Because when voters hear Tesla froze 40 leaves, they don't hear spreadsheet language. They hear instability, they hear loss, they hear what else is about to leave. Now consider how quickly this spirals. Local officials who expected new tax inflows now have to explain why budgets are tight. Workers who expected hiring waves now face delays. Small businesses that planned for new demand now face a quiet season they can't afford. And in California, where cost of living pressure is already intense, a quiet season is not quiet. It's brutal. This is where the pressure compounds. Because EV expansion isn't just a corporate story, it's infrastructure, grid load, permitting, land use. Everything is interconnected. If Tesla freezes, then chargers don't get built as fast. If chargers don't get built as fast, consumer adoption slows. If adoption slows, revenue projections weaken. If projections weaken, financing costs rise. And when financing costs rise, more projects freeze. That's the loop, that's the spiral. And it's why this moment feels like a crack, not a headline. Now let's talk about what the governor likely fears most. The precedent. If Tesla can freeze $40 and survive politically and financially, it signals to other companies that they can do it too. They can pause. They can renegotiate. They can demand better terms. They can threaten to shift investment elsewhere. Think about that. California built its brand partly on being the place companies want to be. But in a high rate, high cost environment, companies start asking a colder question. Where is it easiest to build? Where is it cheapest? Where do we face fewer delays? And that question is lethal to a state that relies on being the default answer. Here is the uncomfortable reality again. California can set aggressive goals, but it cannot force private capital to feel safe. And if Tesla's internal models are flashing red, the governor can shout, threaten, or posture. But he cannot change the numbers inside Tesla's boardroom. And then something else breaks trust. Because if the public starts believing that the EV transition is stalling, even temporarily, it creates hesitation. And hesitation is the enemy of adoption. People delay purchases. Companies delay fleet conversions. Cities delay installation contracts. It all slows. And once a system slows, the cost per unit goes up. And when costs go up, the system slows even more. Now consider the political timing. A high-profile freeze gives opponents a weapon. They can point and say, even Tesla won't expand here. Whether that's fair or not doesn't matter. In politics, perception isn't a factor. It's the product. And that's why the governor erupted. Because it's not just Tesla's decision, it's the symbolic collapse of momentum. But the real problem is this. If the state responds with punishment, Tesla could harden. If the state responds with concessions, critics will call it a giveaway. Either way, the governor is trapped in a squeeze. Do you see it? The state needs the investment, but it also needs to look in control, and those two needs are now in direct conflict. So what happens next is what you should be watching, not the shouting, the signals. Do we see faster permitting and new incentives? Do we see public pressure campaigns? Do we see regulatory threats? Do we see Tesla quietly shifting resources out of state while everyone argues on camera? Because if the freeze turns into a withdrawal, California doesn't just lose $40. It loses the story that it's inevitable. And once inevitability dies, the entire market recalculates. Pause here. This is bigger than Tesla. This is about whether the EV future is accelerating or hitting resistance that nobody wants to admit. So the question isn't, will the governor calm down? The question is, what did Tesla see that made 40 feel too risky in the state that was supposed to be the safest bet? And if that answer comes out, it won't just shake California. It will shake the entire EV transition. Because when the flagship hesitates, everyone feels the wave.